Welcome to The Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. Hi, I'm Bela.and.mike, coming to you from snowy upstate New York. I'm a former 3-time entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and business school professor.
And coming to you from Münster, Germany, I'm Mike Wasserman, professor of international management at the Münster University of Applied Sciences. Thanks for joining us today. When Bela and I were both on the faculty of Clarkson University, we used to have lots of interesting conversations about how the world is changing, and really specifically about how innovation and entrepreneurship are changing. We do this over coffee or over lunch as time allowed. And almost 2 years ago, I moved to Germany, and then shortly thereafter, Bela retired. But Bela had this kind of wacky idea to continue these conversations in the form of a podcast and invite other people to actually listen in on these. And I thought, honestly, this is a horrible idea. I don't consider myself a podcast guy. I don't like my voice, but Bela was right as usual. We've had a great time so far.
Yeah, so join us each week as we talk with interesting people we've met to share stories, ideas, and insights into innovation, entrepreneurship, and the people that take unconventional paths to find happiness in life and at work.
So Bela, tell us about this week's episode.
Before we dive into today's interview, I just want to remind our listeners that one of the key elements of this podcast is to interview business founders we can all identify with. We've had coffee roasters on the show, software developers, business consultants, cafe and restaurant owners. We're not trying to discuss how to start the next Facebook or Google. We want to bring you stories that hopefully will inspire you and help you to realize, hey, I can do that, and then take the first step to start your business journey. This week's guest is Tami Cole. She purchased a business from a founder who ran it for over 20 years. As you can imagine, that came with its set of challenges.
Definitely, Bela. This is an interesting interview, and I'm excited to get to it. But before we begin, let me take a second to remind our listeners that this podcast is brought to you in part by the law firm of Phillips Lytle, LLP. This is a sponsorship to us that makes a lot of sense. Bela, you know this firm well, don't you?
I sure do. I have worked with the key entrepreneurship practice partners at Phillips Lytle for over 20 years. Their nationally recognized attorneys take an entrepreneurial approach to legal matters, and they have a long history of success with startup businesses. Phillips Lytle is my go-to team for guiding startup businesses down the path to success.
So we're excited to have Phillips Lytle as our show's sponsor. You and I both know that they think like entrepreneurs, they take a pragmatic approach to getting things done, and they spot issues before they become problems. So we're happy to advise you that if you need good, solid advice starting, funding, or selling a business, whether you're a single-person startup or working on a 9-figure exit, we can confidently recommend the attorneys at Phillips Lytle. Bela, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with them?
Well, for more information, contact Rich Honan, who is one of their lead partners at Phillips Lytle. If you are old school, phone person like Mike and I, then you can give Rich a call at 518-618-1225. Or if you're from the newer generation and prefers online communication, you can reach Phillips Lytle directly from their firm's website at phillipslytle.com. That's PHILLIPSLYTLE.com.
And it'll be great if you let Rich know that you heard about Phillips Lytle from listening to the Unconventional Path podcast. All right, with that said, let's jump right into today's interview with Tami Cole, CEO of Docstrats.
Hey, and one quick thing, Mike. We recorded this interview at a live event that I do in Schenectady with Rick DeRico. This is a once-a-month event that we do on an entrepreneurship interview series. And so Rick and I interview Tami. So there's a bit more background noise than our usual. But I think it's a well worth conversation and discussion. So hope you all enjoy it. So not everyone in the audience may know what Document Strategies is and what Document Strategies does.
Yes.
Can you sort of talk about that a little bit, please?
I will try to. We do a little bit of everything, but Documentation Strategies actually was founded in 1981, and it was founded by Ann Moynihan, who focused a lot on technical writing and training, mostly for the big, large state implementation projects. I look at her as a pioneer in that industry because 1981, very few women were doing their own businesses and actually successfully being able to build something that would last 31 years. So we currently today, we're at the end of the day a staff augmentation firm. I like to call us the white glove treatment. And I have 10 to 12 clients at any given time. I get to know them extremely well so they can pick up the phone and say, here's the trouble I'm having, or here's the position I need. Can you please find me someone? That's my golden client, because it's easy for us, it's easy for them, we get to know each other. At the end of the day, it's keeping those clients close and the relationships deep, and same thing with my consultants, the people that work for me. We have folks who have worked on and off with the company for 20, 30 years now, so it's wonderful and awesome to have that history. And my best working experience at the time was, or in my life to date, has been for a small company called DRT Systems a really long time ago. It was about 65 of us. A ton of opportunity being given to people who needed it, and we were a very close-knit family. And to this day, we still remain close. That's what I'm trying to reproduce here. One of my fellow DRTers is here, Anthony DePonis, and he's at Troy Webb. DRTer. Okay. Dirty Dogs, our softball team.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's got a very similar model and attitude. Like those of us who came out of that time together, we really just appreciate close-knit, tight-knit community for our resources and for our clients.
Awesome. I'm going to not use a mic. Can everybody hear me? I usually like to use a mic because it is for recording, but I'm going to skip it because I think we have issues.
I totally skipped what we do.
So, yeah.
Technical writing, training. We do a lot of functional placements. So my background's information technology, which we'll get to. So we really align ourselves with public sector, state government on large projects like MMIS or the workers' compensation system that's being overhauled right now, motor vehicle system being overhauled, and we provide resources such everything but development. There's enough developers in the area. We don't have that expertise. So business analysts, project managers, testers, etc.
And how many employees? I think you said?
Right now we're at 26.
Okay.
We just put 6 on in the last 2 weeks.
So, big question: what led you to basically buy the company? 5 years ago. If you could describe a little bit of the process, and also just if you had any advisors that helped you, and we'll get into some of the details later.
Sure.
But just what led you to do that?
Work-life balance combined with...
You had too much work-life balance and you needed to...
I had zero work-life balance, and I felt that while I was making a difference as a grain of sand versus a tidal wave, and that I was lining the pockets of my corporation, which I absolutely love. They do an amazing job. To this date, they're very charitable, but I wanted to have more hands-on impact in my world.
Did someone help you? Can you tell us a little bit of that process? Because you're buying a company that was, founded by Ann Moynihan 34 years ago, sole leader all that time, face of the company.
Yep.
So what was that process like, and did anybody help you along the way?
Lots of people helped me along the way. I think what really drew me to Ann and this particular company is that she had been in the business so long, she was very community-oriented and very much aligned with what I wanted to give back and what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to take what she had done and then expand it into more of my general expertise area. And that made it easy in terms of who helped me. At the time, it was my, 6-year-old son who spurred the absolute final decision that I needed to change what I was doing.
Really? How? What do you do?
I was a project manager on a project, and it was my stakeholder, main partner in the company was on the West Coast, and I got a call at night, and it was mommy-son date night. And the partner needed data. The system that I was responsible for was not giving him the data he needed. So I needed to resolve that. You don't say no to a partner. So I'm on the phone. I'm on the computer. I'm talking to, at this point, the system I was responsible for had my developers in India, my testers in China, my development team on shore was spread throughout the country. A lot of people weren't answering their phones. It was a fun evening. And he finally gave up trying to get me to stop working and took his little blanket that he was obsessed with, put it on the floor on my feet on the kitchen floor and just laid there. And I was like, okay, there's nothing worth this in the world. So I said, okay, from this point forward, I need to find something that's going to keep me a little bit more in control of my schedule.
Excellent.
So you buy the company.
Yeah.
You acquire the company.
Yes.
So what was that first day like?
Oh, how about the first 3 months leading up to that first day?
Okay, go.
It took me a year. I mean, I don't know who has their own business or who's decided to take that step. One, kudos to anyone who started from scratch. I know I don't have that in me as an entrepreneurial person. I bought because I had a foundation, I had a baseline, I had infrastructure. Doing it from scratch, absolutely, I don't think it would have happened. So the deciding to buy it, it was like a light switch. Talk about mentors. I had some mentors. I was taking a leadership program, and the question that made me say yes, I want to buy it was, if you lost everything you owned today, your house, your just everything material today, to obtain the positives or the pros that you think you will get from owning this business and making it successful, are you willing to give up everything? And for me at that point, and he said, you can't say yes or no, or he goes, you can't say maybe, it has to be yes or no. And of course I started no, yes or no. So I was able to say, yeah, I'm employable, I can get a job, I don't care, stuff doesn't bother me, I want this life. And so from that second on, I didn't turn back.
That's great. 3
months of negotiating, more than 3 months, but literally 3 months of, you're closing tomorrow, you're closing tomorrow, you're closing tomorrow. So it was a very painful process for Ann and I the last 3 months, but we finally got there. And
are you still talking?
Oh, yeah.
No. I'm just teasing. I know you are. I knew that answer to that question.
Yes. She's having the fun time of her life, and one of the things that I remember the most is I worked with her a few weeks before the actual transition just to get to know the clients, the accounts, what I was getting myself into, and I would go into her office all excited and pumped up and ready to kind of take on the world, and she'd be sitting there a little stressed out and she goes, you just wait, I give you 3 months before the tables turn. It took me a little longer, but when I did see her, I was like, okay, Ann, you're right. It's not quite as giddy and all this when everything's on your shoulders, but it went well. Day one was good. She did not stay on. We agreed. We had a transition period because I had been there for about a month before. So she went on her way, took care of any questions I had through the phone, and that was it, off and running.
I should say, I didn't say this at the beginning, we do like to engage you early on, so I'll be poking my head. If you have anything, just kind of make a wave of some sort, and we'll try to get you in early, so you don't have to wait to the very end.
So let's go back to that first day. So it sounds like with this a 30-day transition or so folks knew the company was going to be sold. They knew you were coming, so it wasn't like a surprise, right? Or was it?
Not really. It was probably the worst kept secret because I was brought in I was working as a consultant, okay. And it was until it actually closed. We didn't say anything. We had been waiting 3 months, so she's working here as a consultant, learning some things, figuring out where she can help us out, and then on the 5th of February, it was okay, yeah.
So my question earlier is still good. So that first A, right?
Yeah.
So February, what day was it?
5th.
5th. So the morning of February 5th, you walk in.
Yeah.
To the office. And so what was that?
It was the afternoon because we closed in the morning, and came in. It was just like anything else. Didn't talk to anybody any of the employees. Kind of spoke with a gentleman who had been acting as her COO for a couple of years, and he knew the process. So he and I had a long conversation, and his plan was to exit. But of course, I got him to stay for a while. He really helped me. And so day 2 came, and that's when I started making changes. I knew just looking at her overhead, what direction I wanted to change, where I needed to go, just to be what I thought we needed to be to continue what we had and to grow. So day 2 I came in and had to fire my first employee, lay off my first employee. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that wasn't fun. But that's something I knew.
Is it the first time you ever had to fire somebody?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always fun. Had to do it a few more times, but it gets easier when you think about.
See, you said we were softening the questions. She got right to the punch.
Well, that's the hardest part. It's like eat the darn frog.
It's not that.
Eat the frog.
Explain that, because maybe not everybody knows what the eat the frog expression is.
Eat the frog. The last thing you want to eat in front of you. Whatever the thing you're most afraid of, the thing that's going to take the most time, the thing you're procrastinating against, take it on first. It's because you can't enjoy anything else knowing that that's hanging over your head. It took me a really long time to learn that, and I'm still learning a whole lot of stuff. But that's one of the things.
Day 2 is not that long.
I had time as I was like, okay, this person has to go, and this one I'm questionable.
Was it because they weren't fitting into the culture, or was it their job? Was there just a change in the culture that you were trying to create? Probably give me a sense of what, because people in this audience probably maybe have some difficult decisions they may be facing or have already had to face? Maybe
That
you can get
was
some
3.5
insight.
years ago. I really know. The first one was easy because it was a business model approach I didn't agree with. It was,
Okay.
someone in-house, and I had gotten some feedback. I had talked to, I had some idea about this person. So it was more of a performance issue
Okay.
along with the way her salary model and all of that was based. So I was like, you know what, I'm going in a new direction. It made it very easy not to just rip the Band-Aid, to not say, we'll give it 30 days and see how it goes. It was
Good.
kind of come in and say, it's got nothing to do with you. It's got to do with, this is not what I see for this position. I'm very sorry. Here's a severance, and go.
move on.
What someone says, freed her future. Freeing someone's future is what they call it, instead of
That's a
firing.
nice colloquialism.
Yes, we're freeing your
We're
future
freeing
to
your
go do
future.
the next thing, exciting thing in your
So if I
life.
get an email from Tony today that says, I'm freeing your future,
Oh.
Rick.
No, don't use those words. I'll be in trouble.
Well, I'll be in trouble.
So, Tammy, you said that you had a slightly sort of different vision for where the company should go and the things that you should be doing. So how did you communicate that vision to the employees that were now part of the business that you were running?
I think it was very easy for the employees that were there. Because of the type of work we do, we're very contract-based. We are not a large organization. We are not able to keep people on if we don't have work for them, which is something I would love to change in the future. But to be honest, I don't know where we are 3 years from now. I could be selling completely different services in 3 years. So we're temporary project-based employees, so one-on-one conversations with each of them, talking about their project, when their project was up. And one of my goals is always to know when are they getting rolled off their project so that I can be out shopping and finding something else for them. It doesn't always work, but as I was an independent contractor once, I personally know the experience of what it's like to be an island, and all you're doing is, okay, I'm working, they're billing, and if I need help, they're not here to support me, which was a very terrible feeling. It was just a terrible feeling. So that's one of my reasons for doing this, is to kind of treat people fairly, kindly, and just be very transparent and open with what we can and can't do.
What you offer as a company is completely different from what you bought, isn't it? Documentation strategies, Docstrats, you talked about IT services before. I remember you telling me that there was a wholesale change in terms of who you are today versus what you were 5 years ago.
5 years ago, we were very dependent upon the state, New York State government contracts. So I don't know how many of you work with public sector, but understand that New York State contracts, they have a requirement that every prime vendor, anyone who holds a contract, needs to give, it's now 36% out to minority, women-owned, and service-disabled veteran organizations. Great concept. I applaud the governor and all of the, it's the right spirit. And we were able to live for a very long time on that 15%. And supporting people like the big companies, say an Accenture or a PwC has a project, they come to us, they have to use us. They have to use AWBE, so we make sure we're the best, in my opinion. But, that's how we get our business. And the last few years, right around that time that I bought, the structure changed. They introduced this hourly-based ITS contract. They introduced a project-based contract. And these are different contract vehicles. If you're not on them, you're not working with the state, for most people in my service type industry. At the same time, they consolidated, that was about 7 to 10 years ago, they consolidated ITS. So the challenge that happened 5 years ago was the states no longer have an easy way to contract with agencies, with large firms, with small firms. It really debilitated a lot of what we could do. So I had to kind of look and say, how are we going to start working with this? It's getting better. PBITS is getting a little more popular, but there's no way to do discretionary contracts, et cetera. There are ways, but it's not being done. Agencies are not doing that. So I had to change and look at private sector.
So you've expanded your customer base then, based on what you just said.
Yeah, I had to pivot and look at private sector. And at the time, private sector was the last couple of years, which is an interesting beast. It took me almost a year to realize you guys are different, very different. My whole history has been working with consulting large government type projects. So that took me a while to learn, and I started really getting good at doing some, figuring out how to sell to private sector, and the state is exploding again. So now we're back to focusing on helping our larger clients do that. And so it's like a pinball.
You don't feel like it's all or nothing. You still try to keep both hands.
Yeah, I have 7 public sector and 5 private sector. Okay. So it's a good balance right now. It's just they both have their own challenges.
Any questions yet? All right. So can you give me I'm going to go back to the culture question a little bit. Just give me a little bit of what's the culture of Docstrats today? How did you change it? What kind of things are your priorities? How does that look? Just so we can kind of really get a visual on the culture, because you really are big into culture.
Very big into culture. I can't do a lot of what I would like to do as a business owner yet. I do as what I can. One of the first things I did was get rid of the simple IRA plan, because as contractors, many of us don't have the opportunity to save money. So I implemented from day one that we do a matching 401k, which is different in this industry. I was never offered that as an independent contractor, so I really like the idea of being able to give back to our folks and have them have the ability to have a nest egg where they typically wouldn't otherwise. We do telemedicine. Again, contractors don't necessarily get tons of benefits or great opportunities that way, so we have free telemedicine, which is, I would say, any employer should be doing for their people, because it's saved our folks a lot of time, a lot of money, and it's just, I've used it personally probably 5 times in the last 5 years, and it's saved me so much every time. So those things, we have barbecues, we have holiday gatherings, we do, get-togethers when we can to make sure that everyone stays cohesive and as a unit.
So one of the things that you mentioned when we had our phone conversation to prep for this was that it takes a certain amount of courage to step off the curb and buy a business and be a business owner. Yeah. Is there like a history of entrepreneurship in your family, or sort of where did that come from?
No. No, not at all. So actually, I spent probably the first 40, what am I now? I don't even know. I don't count anymore. But a long time in my life being told that what I wanted was too much. It was, you're dreaming too big. You should be satisfied with what you have. Best example, I had a wonderful job with the state as a grade 6 keyboard specialist, and this opportunity came up to go into a client server development boot camp program to become a programmer and better my life, and my entire family but one was like, it's too risky, don't do it. And just I did that, and then I spent years being like, okay, I have no education, I have nothing, just fighting all of this. And then I joined an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, and my world just completely opened up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not wrong to want more. I'm not wrong to want to push the envelope. I'm not wrong to want to better my world and those of the world people around me. Wait, how could I be so wrong for so long? So even to this day, I find myself fighting that natural instinct to kind of be small and stay back and try to not ripple the waves too much. But then I wake up and say, wait, you're not looking to do any, what you're looking for is right. It's okay. It's, ethical. It's all these things. You want to do better for everybody. Go do it. Yeah. So EO really helped me with that. It's called Entrepreneurs Organization. We're all business owners in the capital region. It's global. I've had the opportunity to go to Frankfurt. I've met business owners from Russia, Germany, Mexico. It's such an amazing organization, because now I'm talking to people, Darren, for example, when we can't make payroll. I mean, there's been times when you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't, it looks like they're not paying us in time. How am I going to make payroll? And my friends are like, yeah, so sorry. You own a business. Feel for you.
That's the EO people?
No, my friends.
My
friends who are not
but
business
the EO
owners.
Give you some insight.
But EO is, we're
so
all
Janelle
that
goes, sorry,
way.
Feel bad.
No, God. Darren would never. And then the squirreliness. Like, I'm all over the place. We had an event yesterday, and it was mind-boggling. So I'm a continual learner. So all of a sudden, the 40-some years that I have been suppressed is all coming out now, and I want to conquer the world today. So that's my challenge today, is to kind of, I'm like, yeah, am I afraid? Sure. Who isn't? but fear is something I can control. So at the end of the day, I let myself be afraid for a little bit, but then just get off your damn butt and go do what it is that you want to do that's going to take you to that next level.
Give us a sense of how you've grown as a leader in the last 5, and as a person, I guess, in the last 5 years.
I'm coming into my own. I'm still growing, hopefully just emotionally and mentally, but I have really figured out who I am, and I know my weaknesses, and there are a lot, but I also know my strengths. And I have taken on all of the pieces of wisdom and knowledge that I've gained over the years and really try to look at that every single day. And then in EO, I have a forum we're 7 of us, and we are like best friends. They know everything about me, I know everything about them, and we text having a bad day. I've had a lot of personal issues happen over the last few years. Without them and that support where I can be truly open and in a confidential environment, I don't know that I would be able to be here today.
It can be kind of lonely as a CEO, I think. You can't go out and hang, I'm assuming. It's like there's that line of friend versus employee. I don't know if there's is it lonely being a CEO? Can it be lonely at the top, as they say, or?
I think it can be lonely in difficult times, sure. I think that due to the type of work I do, we have services and everything is contract-based. I think my relationship with my employees are a little bit different. Obviously, if there's something that needs to be handled, we handle it. But I know about their kids. I know about their hobbies. I don't see it in that type of we're not hierarchical in any way. Okay. My CFO, I had someone come in doing a census. Is she your partner? I'm like, he goes, well, I meant business partner. I'm like, well, either way, she's my business partner, but she will not take on any of the risk. But to me, I look at her as my equal because she gives me she's my yin. Right. We balance each other. So. That's how I am. I'm open, I'm honest, I do lead from the heart, which I'm learning to not do all the time because sometimes it's just not appropriate or good for me. So those are lessons I'm still learning too.
So I'm going to go off script.
Okay.
2-part question. What was the best decision you've made since you've engaged in this adventure with Docstrats, and what's the worst decision you've made?
Ooh.
Just one of each,
Let's start
please.
with the negative. The negative is hiring friends or family. Never do it. I was going to be different. It was going to be successful for me. Don't do it. Ever. Ever.
Why? Why is that?
It's just painful.
Sorry for my comment.
It's just painful. It's, I didn't feel like I could say something if their performance was, less than expected, or if they were taking advantage of coming in late or leaving early, or it just was very, very hard, and I've chosen that will no longer happen so that I can have that. So if there's a line, it's the family-friend line, not hierarchical. Can't do it. I can be friends with my employees, but I can't have friends and family be employees. It just doesn't work. The best thing I ever did, I would say, would be to actually sign the papers and take charge. Just do it. Just do it. It's been every day's an adventure.
So no buyer's remorse?
No. Well, today? Today, no. Let me see what happens when I get back to the office. I'm waiting on a contract. And no buyer's remorse at all, because it's an amazing growth opportunity. And I would say, especially to all the women out there who might struggle, dive in. People want to help. People can help. And, there's a lot of us out there to support each other.
Excellent. So, perfect. We're just going to get ready to go to the audience for some questions. So,
are there any real pros and cons to being a weebie?
There's absolutely a pro if you've got the relationships established or you have the network to be able to go and make those relationships. And you have the people that you can provide services to. For me, it's successful because we are staffing, and we're staffing several people of different types. We're not a unique niche type firm. I'm trying to think of something. I know someone who's doing say a process improvement firm or something like that, that could be a little bit harder as a small WBE because you've got a lot more hurdles to go over. It's not that it can't be done, but the WBE pros are when the big companies can come to you and say, hey, will you take the training section on? Will you give me all of these technical writers? We are, at our largest, we were 35 people. I'd like to get up a little bit more. But for someone to come to me and say, for a $50 million project, can you take 15% and do the entire thing? That's a huge risk for us as a small business. But then for the primes to take on 5 WBEs to meet that goal is a risk for them. So it's been successful for me. It's been successful for a lot of the folks that I think have been in the industry. I know service disabled right now is really, growing and being looked at. I just know that it's a challenge to, 1, get certified, and 2, to get that ball rolling. So it's not an easy path. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, though.
Other questions? Oh.
Tami, without going into specifics that you're uncomfortable sharing, can you talk a little bit about the deal, putting it together to purchase it? Was it a buyout over time, and did that ever burden the company? And any specifics or lessons learned there?
Yes, great question. So we did a direct payout. We got an SBA loan when I bought the business. And so we closed, money was transferred over to Ann. She was required to keep 10% because that's part of the whole SBA program. And so we took care of that. I also bought the building at the same time. So I'm in Rensselaer, and actually it's a beautiful old brownstone that is being listed because there's 3 of us for 5,400 square feet. Little plug there. Let me know if you're looking for real estate. So we bought the building and the business, closed in one day. One day, checks were handed over. We had to put up our own cash, which was significant. And the one thing I did not know, which I was almost like 2 days before closing, was like, excuse me, how are we supposed to run the business? Naively, I thought the money in the bank I was buying. So there was a balance. And in her mind and her lawyer's mind, no, that's their money. And looking at a business 5 years later, I can see it was her money. But for her to tell me she's taking that, putting the balance to 0, even though I've got, $300,000 worth of bills to pay, no, that didn't work well. So we did have to scramble at the end there. So it's just really, truly understanding and making sure you have the right attorneys' feedback. You ask all the questions. I had a lot of fear going on with me then. They were big numbers, man. I was like, please don't make me look at this. But now that I understand it more, I think that's one of the key things. Just know what you're getting specifically, all the way down to the last penny in the bank accounts. That was a huge wake-up call. And we're still dealing with it.
Go ahead. I was going to think, you mentioned the word fear, so I wanted to jump in, because you used, when we were talking to you, you said fear stinks.
It does.
But it pushes you.
Oh, yeah.
So do you still have moments of fear?
All the time.
And so how do you push through that, and how does it, I don't know.
Well, after I go hide in a corner for a few minutes and just let myself go, this really sucks, I don't want to do this, I look at, what's the end goal? And then I make that decision. Is it bettering my life? Is it not? If it doesn't mean anything to me, like I have no desire to bungee jump ever. But jumping out of a plane scares the shit out of me. So I have to do that. And I don't know why, but I don't have to bungee jump, but I have to jump out of a plane.
Where's Craig Skevington?
Yeah, right? I know, I saw him. I was like, what? I was supposed to be at that one. I would have gone with Erica. So anyway, it's just, I got to decide what is the end goal. And if it's something that is going to give me something that's going to make me better as a person, then I have to do it to prove to myself that I'm not holding myself back.
Right. Good.
Although roller skating, I broke my ankle, so I will not roller skate or ski,
And no bungee jumping.
And no bungee jumping.
Over here.
Mike.
Well, it sounded like fear isn't a great, it sounds like overcoming fear is a big motivator.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's your now, this far in, what's your big motivator? What's the big?
Improving the lives of those around me, including myself. I mean, I want to be financially secure. I'm not going to hide that, but I don't need to be a multimillionaire. I know what I need to be comfortable. I know what my goal is, and I want the people that work with me and for me to have as much success and opportunity as I can possibly give them, because they'll pay it forward, too.
so you're always recruiting, hiring. How do you feel the job market is locally? What is your take on kind of your niche and sector?
It's extremely, extremely tight. It's very hard to find good people these days. Our process has lengthened significantly. We're talking to 3, 4, 5, 10 times as many folks to find the right people, because for a small business, I have to meet them and I have to say, is this person going to represent me well? Because if I don't feel they have the Docstrats mentality and are going to represent us well out in the community, that's a black eye on me, and a small business can only handle so many. So it's been really, really tough. I'm looking at very innovative ways to kind of get outside of my region. And another interesting angle I'm looking at is a lot more remote work, but for, national type, remote workers working nationally, because, that's becoming more and more of the marketplace. And
do you have remote workers now?
I do.
So how do you handle that in terms of just, monitoring how they're doing and just staying in the culture of Docstrats? How do you?
So far it's going great because they're local, and they're working remotely. So I have a good relationship again with my clients. Ask me in 6 months. I'm just hiring my first 2 people from out of the state of New York to work remotely on a project for a client I have here. That is a little interesting. That is a little unnerving. But it's necessary. So if I want to grow, so we're going to try it. I have no idea how it's going to go. Hopefully we'll continue the same way. I'm trying to cluster folks so they're in the same, similar location, so I can go and see them at once or twice a year and that. So it's interesting.
So
but the market's very tight.
What does a Tami Cole of today wish that the Tami Cole 5 years ago knew? If you could go back in time, what is the one thing that you wish you knew going into this? Well, because there's people here who maybe thinking about doing something like this, and so maybe you can get into some pearls of wisdom here.
Very few pearls of wisdom here. I would like to say everything. I'd like to know everything, but it's easy to say hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
I think just knowing that I don't have buyer's remorse and that I am still married to the idea of why I did this in the first place and the impact that I'm seeing every day that I'm able to make in terms of local people either changing careers or whatever it may be. It's really exciting, and I love learning new things, meeting new people, and then taking on the next obstacle. So I think if I knew anything that I would have known, it could have changed some things. So I don't look at it like that.
Good. Over here.
So looking back even further.
Oh, gosh. Yes, Anthony.
23 some odd years ago, the campus, are things you still draw on from those days?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially, this is where the fear and the control of fear comes from. So 23 years ago when I joined DRT, I was a secretary for the state handing out large checks to people who were sleeping. And I was a single mom trying to raise a child. And I was bored out of my mind. And I was so miserable. Then I was transported into this world, this wonderful opportunity where I was given to take this 16-week boot camp where I had to study my butt off and all of that. The fear that I faced every single day thinking I wasn't good enough and I wasn't going to make it and I wasn't going to pass the next quiz. I wasn't going, oh, look at these people, they're so much smarter than I. And dealing with that day in and day out and day in and day out. That's where the core of my strength comes from. And then just the unity. I mean, the time we spent together, locked in a room, drawing a black box generic database or architecture that could be used with, agnostically. The things I've learned from so many great people. There were a ton of mentors at DRT, great people that just, some with us, some not with us, and just cared deeply to their soul, through their soul, that we succeeded.
I was talking to Maya earlier that you learn so many things, and you don't always know how, the ROI on some of these things. You just don't realize the impact it really has. It's
Correct.
Beyond that moment.
Correct.
Ken had his hand up, and then I saw a hand over here. But Ken?
So what's your vision and where you want to be with the company 5 years from now?
That, my vision right now is to grow, probably double the revenue, but not necessarily grow the client base. I'd like to do more organic growth, keep the white glove treatment, bring in some more resources that potentially could be, full-time hire working for us as a regular employee as opposed to project-based, working more nationally, like having, like, we're really good at technical writing or documentation or standard operating procedures, all of that. That's so easy to be offloaded from companies to a single unit. And that's something I would love to see us be able to do, is kind of have a team and we just churn these things out for these companies, so that, especially with the changeover in staffing and how short-term employees tend to be these days, it's so much more important to have all of those ducks in a row, so that the next person comes in, it's like, here you go. You don't need someone who you're paying $100,000 to sit down and spend 3 weeks getting this person up to speed. So there's that. And then our 50th, believe it or not, 50 years will be in 11 years. So I look at that as a pretty interesting target. Will I be ready to exit at that point? Will I definitely see myself reducing my amount of time so I can go on to other adventures, but that won't be for at least 5 years now.
Okay, we got 3 minutes, and I always end at 1 o'clock, so it's got to be quick.
Yeah, well, I just want you did an amazing job on the mic, and thank you for being so authentic. I use your product and I love it.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Any questions? Janine. Last question. Make it a good one.
Okay.
Oh, pressure.
Talk about your growth.
Yes.
Do you at times question, you mentioned maybe having more organic growth, increasing your revenue based on the clients you have now. But do you sometimes also wonder if, as the company grows and changes, if maybe that's also going to create a necessity for the types of clients that you service to change? Maybe you outgrow some of the clients you now have in order to grow the company.
I do think that is a possibility. My hope and my goal would have that be towards the tail end, where, let's just say, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I will not be owning this company when I'm 90 years old. So at some point there's an exit strategy. I would think that as I tend to get closer to that, we may grow and morph to make it a little more attractive, so that we're more volume-based or more. But there may be the next, my daughter or someone else might be coming up and want to continue to do the same thing slightly differently, but small, white glove, personal treatment and service, then that'd be great too.
Bela, really interesting. Today we looked at another path to entrepreneurship that we haven't really looked at in the year plus that we've been doing these podcasts, and that is entrepreneurship by acquisition. This is a person who acquired a small business and then transformed it to fit her passions and her interests. So, Bela, I think this idea of changing a vision is interesting. I think you have a group of people, stakeholders that sign into the founder's vision, and then boom, a new owner changes it. From your VC hat, what do investors think about a vision pivot, and how does it impact the various stakeholders of an organization?
Well, these are, I think, one of the more traumatic moments in time for any organization, both for the organization and for the CEO, the new CEO coming in. They're very challenging. And, in the VC world, you see it. Companies growing. It's been around for a couple of years. Things are going really great. But the original founder or the CEO, president, is kind of now operating beyond their skill level because of the size and growth of the company. So a new person gets hired and brought in. In the case with Tami, she actually acquired the business. But from the employee's perspective, it's pretty similar. All of a sudden, you have a new boss. And, it's interesting because I reflect back on my days at IBM and General Electric in the corporate world. And it seemed like I had a new boss every 1.5 to 3 years. That was just part of the normal corporate cycle. People got promoted, people left. So it was something that one got very accustomed to, but there was an overall culture within that larger organization of IBM and GE. Well, in a smaller company, oftentimes people sign on for joining this company because of the culture, because of the leader, because they're inspired by the founder. And now all of a sudden that person is gone and there's a new person coming in. So it's a really, really challenging time for employees as they're trying to figure out, okay, now what's going to happen? How is my life going to change? And there's individuals for whom change is interesting and they embrace it. And there's other individuals for whom change is a real stressful endeavor. So I think as a CEO coming in, it's a really, really challenging situation to be in, where you have to sort of balance things. And, you know, are you going to tear the Band-Aid off real quick and say, okay, this is it. This is what we're doing. Or are you going to make a much more gradual approach to it? And I'll tell you that I've experienced both in my previous lives, where I've had a new boss or a new boss's boss come in, and they tore the Band-Aid off, and they said, in essence, okay, there's a new sheriff in town. Here's the new rules, and this is what we're doing. And we've had other ones, I've experienced other ones that are much more gradual and slower. I think in either case, what's really important is clarity in communication and over communicating what you now expect to have happen. Because I think if you do a poor job in communicating, then the rumor mill starts and then it's out of control. So this is one where I think communicating and clarity and over communicating, repeating the same message over and over and over again, I think is really, really important. And consistency in that message. What do you think, Mike?
I love it, Bela. You got the 3 C's there. Let's add a 4th C, because I think they're all related to something you mentioned, which is culture. And Tami talked quite a bit about culture as well. And this is interesting because to me, we've talked a few times on the podcast so far about the gig economy, this idea of contingent workers or contract workers, and these new platforms. So it sounds like she's got some of these, right? Because her work changes on a regular basis based on the contract she has, and she's in different fields, so she needs a different mix of people at any given time. And, you know, I think that there's definitely a set of rules on who's a contractor and who's an employee. And you have to kind of look at the profile of things that you have your people doing. And are you treating them like an employee or are you treating them like a contractor? But I thought it was fascinating how she's trying to kind of thread this needle and say, look, having some access, she called it, telemedicine, right? But having some access to healthcare, because if you've got somebody on a 3-month contract and they're sick for 3 weeks, this is a problem, right? So I thought that there was some real interesting alignment of issues of keeping your employee, your workforce, in this case contractors, healthy, that we don't normally think about. And her idea of trying to have barbecues and get people together, the ones that were in town, and do things that you would normally think of for employees, they're still contractors, but how can you build this culture? And, she talked about trust and things like that. How important do you think this kind of culture building in our new reality where we have this either mostly contingent contractor workforce or kind of a blend, how do you see this working and changing in the years ahead, Bela?
Well, Mike, there's the legal definition of an employee, which has all sorts of legal ramifications, et cetera. And those vary country by country, state by state. But then there's sort of the ethical definition of an employee. And regardless of what sort of the legal relationship is, you have an organization. And in that organization, it has members. And some of those members legally may fall into one bucket or another bucket. But I think as an organization, you want to treat people the same way because it's about the organization. It's not about whether they are an employee under the laws of New York State or they're a contractor under the laws of New York State. In many ways, I think that's irrelevant. That's sort of a financial and legal relationship you have. But I think from the point of view of how you interact, how you treat them, how they are sort of identified within the workforce, right? If you walk down the hallway at the business, is it obvious who's a quote unquote contract employee and who is an employee? Those are things you got to think about. And sometimes the legal definition and legal requirements drive some of those decisions, but think about it with your organization hat on and not with your lawyer hat on.
Yeah, my wife Sandy studies these, and she and I have done some research on this. I was involved in a couple of projects with her a few years ago, and we were at clients where literally the name tags were very different, and you had people working side by side, right? In the same location, this kind of co-location where the contractors are on site. But they had very different badges. They had different rules in terms of how, where they could go in the building, what they could have access to. And it created a lot of strain and really like a two-tier system. And when you have people that you want to pitch in together and to find a common goal and serve a common customer, this creates some gaps. So I think this is a really interesting concept, and it was interesting to her, even just for the little bit that she talked about, to talk about building a culture from a mixed workforce. And I think that's something moving forward that it's society in general, business leaders in general, entrepreneurs are going to need to really deal with and find some ways to stay within the legal bounds, but deal with the ethics, as you said, and deal with the cultural part of building an organization where people have different status. But we need to share some commonalities in terms of where we're headed.
Yeah, another thing I thought was interesting is about the risk, and I never really thought about it this way until she sort of brought it up. Most entrepreneurs think about starting a business, and so they're there on day one, they grow it. It's sort of a gradual thing for the most part. But she started her entrepreneur career like, boom, parachuting in from Mars, so to speak, into this existing organization. And so that's really commitment, right? A lot of entrepreneurs, they still have their day job. They're working on their project in the evenings and weekends with their friends. And then at some point they get committed and leave their day job and go all in. But Tami was really like, boom, this is it, day one. And here I am. And it's like with any acquisition, whether you buy a house or whether you buy a car, there are always surprises, some good and some not so good. And so I think that's a real testament to her sort of ability to manage risk and to accept risk and then figure out what to do with it. I think it's sort of at a different level than sort of starting your own business. What do you think, Mike?
I agree, Bela. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about it in terms of time versus money. And in a traditional startup where you spend 1 to 2 years, maybe more, kind of on this runway of kind of gaining traction, gaining funding, gaining scale, and you're building to this point where you go public with your product, that you put a lot of time into it. And you probably put a lot of money into it too. But when you make an acquisition, you've got your due diligence, and she had that transition time, that month, right? But she probably put in a lot more money all at once than most founders do in a typical startup situation. So it really is, it's this shifting, you have constrained resources no matter what, and you have risk, but it's this all-in-one versus this kind of little more runway that you really have to really identify how much risk you're willing to take. And this question of, can you give up everything, all your house, your car, your savings, to do this, yes or no? I thought that was a really interesting way of framing it. So I agree. Was there a part in any of your startup lives where you had this kind of commitment, where all of a sudden you were faced with this decision of, boom, it's all or nothing now? Or were yours always more of the kind of ramp up, and you saw kind of the runway, you saw kind of what was happening, and you had a little more time on your side to make a decision whether to go forward or to shut it down?
No, there was one situation which was sort of similar where I was brought in. I was part owner. I acquired part of the business. I didn't own all of the business, but I got brought in as a partner to run a particular business. So the old CEO was out. I was the new CEO. I showed up on a Monday, and it was an interesting transition. And I think it's, like I said, it's one of the more challenging ones that you encounter. And I think it's very, in many ways, similar to a couple of podcasts ago. We had Brian Epstein on the show, who had Deep Blue Communications, and he got acquired by Comcast. And now that was a little bit different in that Brian remained the leader of Deep Blue Communications within Comcast. So the employees that came along sort of still had Brian as the boss, but now Brian all of a sudden had a new boss. So for him, it was a new experience. And one of the things that really impressed me about his experience was he clearly embraced that as a challenge. And he set it up for himself as, okay, I'm going to figure out how I can make this work inside the Comcast ecosystem. So I think attitude plays an important role in this. And so I think there's this notion of, like I said, what are you going to do? Are you going to rip off the Band-Aid, or are you going to do things more slowly? Some of that depends on, is the company on its way out of business? And if sometimes you have to rip off the Band-Aid. Sometimes you have to make drastic changes, because if you don't, then the whole thing's going to die in 4 to 6 months. Other times you have time to make things more gradual. And so I think that it's like I said, one of the more challenging and more difficult things that exist out there, and it's not one that I have ever seen a course on how to do it. Right? There's change management courses, which I think this sort of can be that are general, right. That can be element of it, but this is a very specific instance of parachuting in and landing, coming to work on Monday. You're announced as the new boss, and boom. And like I said earlier, it's a little different than in the corporate world, because the whole sort of culture, everything doesn't really change all that much, even though maybe your boss did at IBM or GE. But here it's very different.
Yeah, it's an institution, and your boss is only one piece of the institution. The founding CEO of a small business is the institution in so many ways. So I think you're right. I think this, and it works in both directions. Either an entrepreneur starts their entrepreneurial venture via acquisition, or an entrepreneur has their entrepreneurial career in some ways ended by an acquisition, right? And it's this acquisition that creates this moment of upheaval from either direction, either when you're doing the buying or you're bought out. So I think that this is an interesting way to look at it, and I think you're right that we don't study this quite enough as and try to teach things a little bit to people who are going through these situations, because I think that's an important role of educators, right? Is to get people thinking about this before you actually have to go through it. So if it happens to you, you have some preparation, some models to kind of build off of, and to design a strategy that will work.
Yeah, and think about it: of the thousands of VC investments made every year, every one predicates an acquisition will happen, right? Mm-hmm. So there's be some type of exit. Yep. The exit may be an IPO. Yep. Those are pretty rare. But most of them are, you want an acquisition to happen. So it certainly is a set of skills and training that founders should have, and that acquiring company leadership should have. And that's why I think we're really poor at this. That's why I think that the numbers show somewhere around 50% of acquisitions are not successful.
Mm-hmm. They destroy value rather than create value.
They destroy value, not create it. So it's something that I think deserves more study, and it's something that deserves more dissemination and education to the people in those leadership positions, so that they can become better at it.
We should do a little mini exec ed course on this, Bela.
There you go.
We
could bring your better half into that too, right?
Absolutely.
The person who really knows.
What do you
something.
think? Well, that's true in all things. But
yes.
What do you think? Should we call it a day?
Good. Let's wrap it up, Mike.
All right. Well, this was really interesting, Bela. I thought it was a great interview, and I appreciate the thoughtful questions that you and Rick asked Terry. To our listeners, we're happy that you joined us in our podcasting adventure for the week, and we hope that you found the last 45 minutes or so interesting and thought-provoking. As always, we have a couple of small requests. One is, if you have questions or opinions about what we've discussed, some suggestions about future topics or future guests, please get in touch with us. And the best way to do that is email bela.and.mike@gmail.com. And secondly, if you like what you're doing and you haven't already, please hit subscribe on your podcast app, or a like or a thumbs up, or whatever your podcasting platform uses. Something positive would be appreciated if that's the way you feel. If you want to write a quick review, that would be great. And as always, if you know others that might find us interesting, please share us with them.
So that's it for this week. Thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to you joining us for our next episode. Signing off from snowy upstate New York. See you next week, Mike.
Sounds great, Bela. That's it from over here in Münster, Germany, where it's not snowing and there's actually a little blue sky right now. But we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.
This podcast is produced for Mike and I by our friends at Busy Media of Schenectady, New York. They can be found at busymedia.co.